Well, shalomi homies. I just had an exciting little discovery as I was reading the word this morning, and I just wanted to jump on here and share it with you. I don't know how long I'll be able to be on here, and the house is rowdy. It's the daytime. The children are about. The babies are crawling about and getting into all kinds of stuff. So if you hear pounding and knocking at my door, it's going to urge me along here. But I was reading through the book of Matthew this morning, and those of you guys that haven't just kind of add a little discipline to your day, man, jump on just reading a chapter from the Gospels, like throw in, it's just so fun to read in continuity through the scriptures. If you've done that on a regular basis, it kind of gives you the ability to bounce around the scriptures a whole lot more because these parallel connections start jumping out because you start to learn and build in your mind a timeline of history. And it's really imperative if you have that, the foundation of understanding kind of chronologically what happened when throughout history. And I know like this is something that we're taught and trained growing up to how to build understanding about what took place. The problem is most of us got built and raised up in a foundation of falsehood. So like we didn't actually get to hear how historical events took place in the narrative of actual history. We got a version of it, which you if you've not noticed, is continually changing now. We have these manipulations of like what when things actually happened. Like for example, I was always taught the invention of the first automobile, was like in the 1870s, maybe early 1880s, the first internal combustion engine. But then you go back and you start to like examine historical events and you start to find like people were inventing electric vehicles in the 1830s. And you're like, what? And like they were common and all over the place up until like by the 1870s, they were normative. That was the main vehicle use. And you're like, what the heck? That's a totally different paradigm to what you think of in the 1850s, 1860s. Like during the Civil War time frame, they had electric cars. That's super strange. Isn't that weird? Because it's stuff like that where you realize you're like, wow. So the way I was taught history built for me a framework that is totally not accurate. And because of that, I'm not able to clearly identify trends of what has taken place historically. And then I'm not able to really I'm not able to analyze decisions about what is likely to happen in the future again. Right. And you're like, well, so it launches into these spider webs of investigations that I love it. I love history and I love having an understanding and a firm understanding of what has taken place historically that has led us to where we are today. Because if I am better versed at knowing where I came from and what happened to me, like that unlocked for me answers to questions that I had wrestled with throughout my life. And there's a lot of you I know that are watching right now that are unsatisfied with the answers that you've been given about why you are where you are today and why our country, your community, your neighborhood, your family, your friends, why are they the way they are now? Why is it? And and for me, that big question why always launches me into this never-ending treasure hunt. Because for me, when I find the truth, like an actual certainty in my life, it's such a joyous occasion. Like I love treasure hunting so much, so much. Like I absolutely freak out with excitement. I just get geeked out. If you haven't watched the Nature Nate series, you guys, it's not just for, I know it seems like it's catered towards children, but there's wonderful discoveries that are in there that about little truths and pearls that we found along the way that are fantastic. And I'm telling you, just check it out for a little bit because you get to see that glee. And now as my children are getting older, you're getting to see more of it from their angle, their perspective, or other moms and dads or young men, young women, all these different ages of when you find discoveries. Because a lot of people experience creation through digital means. They don't actually go out and experience themselves. And when they do, the wonderful maturation that can happen in the mind when something goes from being an idea in our head or like something we entertain in our mind to something that's formatively established in reality, like in the physical, man, it's a beautiful moment when you finally get to experience that. Like one of my favorite memories, like that's in my mind right now, thinking about this, is watching. I got to take Naomi horseback riding for lessons last year. I don't know, maybe a dozen lessons. And for me, that was something I wanted to be able to do my whole life. I wanted so badly to be able to ride horses, to like ride them well. I got to ride them a couple of times, but it was really one of my sisters. She got all the riding lessons. And so I wasn't able to do that. And I just sat in the barn or watched around in the barn. I didn't get to experience that. And it always left this like longing. But Naomi has such a love for riding horses. And I get to see this experience of like her finally getting to do that. It was like a rescue ranch out in the Ozarks, and they didn't use bits in their horses' mouths. They really did a lot of groundwork. They really focused on learning the animals and rehabilitating them. And it was just amazing first experiences for her to have that. And just this moment of a dream coming true for me was was riding a horse with her in this arena, outdoor corral, I guess. And it was the sun was setting over the mountains, and I just got to see her riding. And it was just so satisfying to me, like seeing my daughter getting to do something she's longed to do throughout her life at a young age. Like there was a purity there, and a fulfillment of a desire that had been decades in the making. It was a treasure, you know. It was a beautiful treasure, and one of those things that I could never have known. One of the rewards of raising children and being present in their rearing up instead of sending them away to somebody else to do that has been unexpected moments like that, unexpected moments of breakthrough. You know, like I'm getting to see these developmental moments of them getting to experience life in a way that's so different than what I had. That's such a contrast to what I knew as normal at her age. And it's just magnificent. It's magnificent. And it's a freedom that literally Yahuah has purchased me for. Like he bought me out of a house of slavery. So like I experience when I read the word, it is real to me because I know what it's like to have been bought and sold as a child. I know what it's like to have been traded around in a world of slavery, like real slavery. And then I got to experience what it was like to be purchased out of that, to literally be ransomed out of that, and how much of an impact that has had generationally. And so when I sit here and I read the scriptures and I get to experience what the Messiah literally finally came here to do, by the time you get to the New Testament, when you read through the scriptures, you're like pulling your hair out, frustrated and exhausted, and like with longing for this settlement of this constant fighting. There's constant fighting, there's disputes, there's secrecy, there's lies, there's cheating, there's adulteries, there's murder. Like, it's crazy. They invent these TV shows to entertain people like Game of Thrones when you can just sit there and read the book of First and Second Kings, and it's way more ridiculous. It's way more ridiculous. Now, they do that stuff to distract you and fill your mind with the garbage instead of actually learning the lessons, these incredible powerhouse moments of actual historical events that are also filled with the supernatural. Like there's flying fiery serpents in the scriptures being sent by Yahuah to slaughter and kill people. Like you're like, what the heck? That's one of those stories in the Exodus story that doesn't get a lot of press coverage. And you're like, dude, it's crazy in there. It gets crazy wild. Stuff that happened out in the desert was nuts. It was nuts. It's so fun though, unless you're like literally look at it like some kind of fairy tale thing and you're like, yeah, it's kind of whatever. Or if you remove that supernatural element to it, it's like whatever. But I can never separate those things from what I read. Like a literal reading and evaluation of the scripture is profoundly impactful on my life. And I was reading this part this morning. This is in Matthew 15. And Yeshua went out from there to withdraw. Oh, maybe I'll just go back a little bit. Let me just go back a little bit because this is one of those passages that people kind of get wrestled out of understanding. And then there's certain translations that just have the additions of man in there to keep the traditions of the elders fostered and fomented today. This is Matthew 15. Then there came to Yeshua scribes and Pharisees from Jerusalem, saying, why do your taught ones transgress the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. So, first of all, you got to understand something. There was a ritual tradition of the elders, of the Yahudim, to wash their hands with ritual washing cups, stone cups, that they would wash one hand and then wash the other hand. They would wash themselves in this manner, like a ceremony, before they would eat, right? That was the tradition. This is not in the instructions of Yahuah. This is not in the scriptures. This is in the traditions of the elders, right? Things like today that have been condensed or consolidated into things like the Talmud, right? These oral traditions that have been preserved. That's one of these things that he's dealing with here. And please understand, when Yeshua opens up his mouth to deal with traditions of man, that's because somebody built a bridge He's trying to build a bridge back to a relationship with the Father that a lot of other people has spent a lot of time reinforcing and putting additional fencing around in order to keep people from potentially breaking an actual command from Yahuwah. They had went and built other insulative barriers to make sure that somebody didn't even get close to breaking a commandment. So that's a lot of times what Yeshua comes in to do is he takes a hammer to a lot of these traditions and he knocks them into oblivion, right? And this is one of the preeminent requirements of what the Messiah would come to do is he would set things in order that had been made into chaos. And he's going to deal with the people that bought their way into these positions of powers who, but in their hearts, they have no real relationship with Yahuwah. They don't really have a true understanding of who he is and how his kingdom's supposed to operate. But they've instead grown up in a historical tradition of liturgical practices, right? These are like the academics of their day. And at the same time, they're the religious zealots, but in a way that's not conducive with what the scripture actually says. So he's going to go to blows with them continually. But answering, he said to them, "Why do you also transgress the command of Elohim because of your tradition? For Elohim has commanded, saying, 'Respect your father and mother, and he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death.' But you say, 'Whoever says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me has been dedicated,' is certainly released from respecting his father or mother. So you have nullified the command of Elohim by your tradition. Hypocrites! Yeshayahu rightly prophesied about you, saying, 'This people draw near to me with their mouths and respect me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching as teachings the commands of men.'" For those of you that are hearing that for the first time and trying to understand what he's even talking about here, about nullifying a command, let me explain it this way. The way that the temple operated was that people would make dedications and offerings to the temple, to the priesthood, right? And they would call the treasury of Yahuwah, the temple of Yahuwah, the treasury. They would often call that the korban, right? And so when people would bring an offering to them, they would say it's korban. It's been dedicated to Yahuwah. And so what would happen is you would have children who had inherited their mothers, their fathers, they inherited their lands, their properties, their assets, right? Well, if one of them was impressed on, for whatever reason, to go and take that and dedicate it to the temple, they would call it korban. It's been dedicated. Well, then if the parents got to an age where they were struggling, right, or they needed to be taken care of, they needed to have their needs met, which is part of the prerequisite requirements for how we honor our mother and fathers, even into their old age. Well, they would say, "Listen, it's already been dedicated to Yahuwah. It's already korban. We can't give it to you. We are freed and we're annulled from having to meet that obligation to you." This is what he's saying when he's like, "Hey, listen, I am released from respecting my father and mother because it's korban." This is the tradition that was being practiced by man that was nullifying the command of Yahuwah, which was, listen, if you've dedicated something to Yahuwah, but you still have responsibilities in this life of people in your life that you are required or you are obligated to take care of, that should supersede whatever you have been said, "Oh, I'm going to dedicate this to the Lord," right? That's kind of a modern version of it that we receive today. There's a practice of pressure that can come from religious institutions that we should be dedicating things to them and then it's never to be touched again, even though if we might have a personal need for a family member that comes up that we need to meet, right? This is them breaking one of the commandments of Yahuwah and making it the normative version of it. This is the stuff that he wants to smash down, right? And let's jump back in here. And calling the crowd near, he said to them, "Hear and understand. Not that which goes into the mouth defiles the man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles the man." Then is so what he's referring to, remember, was this washing. They were accusing him. The whole story started out with them accusing him of breaking the traditions of the elders. And he's saying, listen, they're not going to be eating unclean because they didn't wash in the ceremonial washing. That's not what's going to defile them, right? He's like dealing with the heart of the matter here. "Do you know that what the Pharisees stumbled when they heard this word?" Then his taught ones came and said to him, "Do you know that the Pharisees stumble when they heard this word?" But he answering said, "Every plant which my heavenly Father has not planted shall be uprooted. Leave them alone. They are blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind leads the blind, both shall fall into a ditch. And Kepha answering said to him, Explain this parable to us. And Yeshua said, Are you still without understanding? Do you not understand that whatever enters into the mouth goes into the stomach and is cast into the sewer? But what comes out of the mouth comes from the heart, and these defile the man. For out of the heart comes forth wicked reasonings, murders, adulteries, whorings, thefts, false witnesses, slanders. These defile the man. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile the man. So he's dealing with that tradition that, listen, eating with unwashed hands is not going to make you unclean. Eating in a way that Yahuah has already given as instructions is not what's being altered here. However, there's some translations like the nearly inerrant version, the NIV version, which has added into it right there in parenthetical text. Thus, by saying this, Jesus made all foods clean, which is not in the text. It was never in the text. It was just in some people's modern versions of the Bible. Does that make sense? That's an addition of man. That's that would be a modern tradition of man that supersedes and breaks the commandments of Yah in order to enforce the traditions of man. Most of us have inherited that as one of those traditions, right? He's like, yeah, even though the Messiah ate clean, I don't have to eat clean because, this person says I don't have to, or my elders and my pastors say I don't have to, right? But understand, like, we should never be putting ourselves in a position to break the commandments in order to obey the traditions of people. Does that make sense? So please understand, this is one of those chapters that gets pulled into a lot of different traditions, modern day traditions, that are not logically consistent on one side of the equation, nor are they theologically consistent. They're not built precept upon precept. We don't try to build our doctrine off of stuff from just over here, negating all of the hundreds of other occurrences that may have happened in the past. Verse 20 or 21. And Yeshua went out from there and withdrew to the parts of Zor and Sidon. And see, a woman of Canaan came from those borders and cried out to him, saying, Have compassion on me, O master, son of David. My daughter's badly demon possessed. But he did not answer her a word. And his taught ones came and asked him, saying, Send her away, because she cries after us. And he answering said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This is one of those statements that if you have not read historically through the chronological events of the scriptures, the phrase the house of Israel is not going to mean, or the lost sheep of the house of Israel has no deep contextual meaning to you. However, to the person who he's speaking to, this has imperative, profound ramifications upon it. Okay. Because the house of Israel is the division between the house of Judah and the house of Israel. There's two houses that get divided right after the days of Solomon. And I was reading, this is where I got to today, and I was like, oh man, I love this section in Second Kings, where you jump into this, because this is a breakdown of what happens. We'll get back to that woman and her deliverance story and how Yeshua has compassion on her, but she also has some serious wit and wisdom in order to get him there. But if you go back for a second, I just want to zoom in on a moment in time for where the War of the Thrones, the Game of Thrones, was taking place here. If you go back here into, was it First Kings 12, maybe 11, First Kings 11, no, First Kings 12. Okay, so Solomon, his kingdom is established, and then he is going to die, so he appoints his son Rehoboam to reign in his place. Well, Rehoboam ends up listening to the wisdom of fools, the younger generation, and he ignores the wisdom of the elders on whether or not to severely tax Israel. That's one side of the equation we don't think about. Solomon's wealth, all the crazy wealth that he had, he still was taxing the people at an incredibly high rate. At that time, all 12 tribes of Israel were united. They were fully united. A lot of that uniting process started under the after the war with Nahash, and Saul was established as king. That's when a lot of Israel's like, all right, we're gonna back you, Saul. That was after the war with the serpent king of Ammon. After that took place, the people began to be much more united. During the reign of David, they got totally established, and then during the reign of Solomon, further so. But that only lasts for like 80 years, 100 years. It's like a blip in the radar, and now it's all about to get torn apart. And this feudal war that begins to take place breaks out into all kinds of different ramifications. So let's zoom in here for a second on this moment in history, because it's critical to the story. And Rehoboam went to Shechem. Oh, wait, well, we'll skip ahead to that part. So this is after Rehoboam rejects the advice of the elders, and he keeps. No, let's just zoom in. We'll zoom in because we're talking about taxes. Gosh dang it, taxes. Pray for me. Taxes are difficult. That's one of those elderly adult things in life that mathematics is definitely important and helpful. So pay attention, children. That's one of those times in life where you're going to need to know mathematics. It's good for you. Learn it. It's helpful. Not all the time, but that's one of those times when you need to know it, man. It's imperative that you not be taken captive by the snare of the enemy and all the pitfalls that are in there, Keep records. Chapter 12. And Rehoboam went to Shechem. This is the son of Solomon. For all Israel had gone to Shechem to set him up for the rain. And when it came to be when Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Mitzrayim, for he had fled from the presence of sovereign Shelemah, that's Solomon, and had been dwelling in Mitzrayim. And they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, Your father made our yoke hard, and now lighten the hard service of your father, and his heavy yoke which he put on us, when then we will serve you. And he said to them, Go away for 3 days, then come back to me. And the people went. Then sovereign Rehoboam consulted the elders who had stood before his father, Shelemah, when he still lived. And he said, What do you advise me to answer these people? And they spoke to him, saying, If you are a servant to these people today, and shall serve them, and shall answer them, and speak good words to them, then they shall be your servants all the days. But he ignored the advice of the elders gave him, and consulted the young men who had grown up with him, who stood before him. Just listen to this for a second. Rehoboam grows up as a prince of Israel in the most powerful financial empire in the world. Okay, that's Rehoboam. That's where he grows up in. Now, what do you think his friends are used to Rehoboam like? Do you think they had probably pretty party central lifestyle? You know what I'm saying? Very different upbringing than what David had as a child, right? The difference between a young son who is raised in the wilderness versus the one who's raised in the palace could not be more contrasting, right? Rehoboam also was alive during the time of watching his father turn to become the literal embodiment of evil on the earth. Solomon, the master mason himself, this is where a lot of the Masonic lineages, the Luciferian lineages, they go through Solomon back to Nimrod because he embraced the dark arts. He embraced the forms of divination and witchcraft and child sacrifice and idolatry on the worst scale. Like he had family members. Rehoboam saw family members of his being burned alive in the fires to these other mighty ones. So that's the upbringing he got, right? And so you can imagine the types of prince's friends that he has, probably not the best advisors. You know what I'm saying? Makes a huge difference. And the young men who'd grown up with him spoke to him, saying, Say this to the people who have spoken to you, saying, Your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us. Say this to them, My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. And now my father laid a heavy yoke on you, but I add to your yoke. My father flogged you with whips, but I flog you with scourges. So Jeroboam's like the leader, representative of the house of Israel at this time, answered the people, and he came. Oh, excuse me. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the third day, as the sovereign had spoken, saying, Come back to me the third day. But the sovereign answered the people harshly and ignored the advice which the elders had given him. So he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men. And he said, My father made your yoke heavy, but I add to your yoke. My father flogged you with whips, but I flog you with scourges. So the sovereign did not listen to the people, for the turn of events was from Yahuah, in order to establish his word, which Yahuah had spoken by Ahiah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. So previous to this story, Yahuah had sent a prophet to Jeroboam when he was over in Mitzrayim, saying, I am going to anoint you to be the leader over the house of Israel. And he's like, What? Who am I? But Yahuah has set up the events back in King Solomon's lifetime while Solomon's reigning on there. And as he starts to go into that path of iniquity, as he's in there, Yahuah starts stirring up and raising up adversaries for Solomon. Those adversaries, some of them, they rise up, they germinate, and they grow into fruition during the life of Solomon, and they become a plague to him, enemies against him. Some of them are like counselors, like shrewd, nasty, evil conspirators working against him. Others are more kind of militant style resistors to him, one of which was raised up during the time of David. So during Solomon's youth, Yahuah was raising up the enemy for Solomon back then. So it's like a crazy, wild story. And this is always like, if you're a story writer, if you're like someone who was to put these into film, you could zoom in on all these little micro stories as the scripture goes along. And it's just fantastic. You could make endless amounts of books and series through just this timeline of history. It's gripping. Man, I love the authors of scripture. They're fantastic. Chapter 6, verse 16. And all Yisrael saw that the sovereign did not listen to them. Then the people answered the sovereign, saying, What portion do we have in David? And there is no inheritance in the son of Yeshai. Say to your mighty ones, O Yisrael, now see to your own house, O David. So Yisrael went to their tents. But as for the children of Israel who dwelt in the cities of Yehudah, Rehoboam reigned over them. So this is really where it becomes the house of Judah, the house of Yehudah, and the house of Israel. And when sovereign Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the compulsory labor, all Yisrael stoned him with stones, and he died. He sent the tax collector. He's like, hey, you guys going to get back to work, compulsory labor. He's like, you're going to get back to work. And they're all like, we're going to stone your face in. So Rehoboam hastily mounted his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. Thus Yisrael revolted against the house of David to this day. And it came to be when all Yisrael heard that Jeroboam had come back, they sent for him and called him to the congregation and set him up to reign over all Yisrael. There was none who followed the house of David except the tribe of Yehudah only. And Rehoboam came to Jerusalem, and he assembled all the house of Yehudah with the tribe of Benjamin. So this is why you'll see also it tends to be the house of Israel's 10 tribes, and then there's 2 in the house of Judah, because Judah and Benjamin cling together, whereas all the rest of the other tribes like Naphtali and Dan and Gad and Asher, they all, Manasseh and Ephraim, they all like cling to the house of Israel. But the word of Elohim, let's go back a second. 180,000 chosen brave men, that's Gibborim, to fight against the house of Yisrael, to bring back the reign to Rehoboam, son of Shelemah. But the word of Elohim came to Shemaiah, the son of the man of Elohim, saying, Speak to Rehoboam, the son of Shelemah, sovereign of Yehudah, and to all the house of Yehudah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, saying, Thus said Yahuah, do not go up or fight against your brothers, the children of Yisrael. Let every man return to his house, for this matter is from me. So they obeyed the word of Yahuah, turned back according to the word of Yahuah. And Jeroboam built Shechem in the mountains of Ephraim and dwelt there. And he went out from there and built Penuel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, Now the reign shall return to the house of David. If these people go up to do slaughterings in the house of Yahuah at Jerusalem, then the heart of this people shall turn back to their master Rehoboam, sovereign of Yehudah, and they shall kill me and go back to Rehoboam, sovereign of Yehudah. So here he is. He's afraid he's going to lose power. But who's the one who established his kingdom? Never forget this. If Yahuah establishes your house and he builds it up for you, it's in his power to establish it fully, and it's in his power to tear it down and take it away from you as well. But listen, it's this fear of losing power that leads to generations, hundreds of years of a massive foothold of idolatry in the children of Israel. It's literally this moment. This is the seed that is sown into this heart of this king that is going to infect the children of Israel for hundreds of years. There will be more violence and bloodshed and horrible atrocities that take place because this one king has this fear in his heart. And you know what? It doesn't get uprooted, and it carries on throughout the entirety of the rest of the scriptures. As you're reading along, you're going to hear this phrase, thus they did according to the sins of Jeroboam. The people will follow after the sins of this king for hundreds of years, and it becomes the pitfall for the people for so long. And it's one of those things never to forget. Like, if it doesn't work in your own house, don't export it. You know, if it this is going to bear the fruits of poison to everybody else. And this is why we should model our life carefully off of the ways that the scripture says, this is the stuff that's going to bring good fruit into your life. This is the stuff that's going to poison you. Same thing, whether it's our dietary things and we're sitting down to eat a meal and we're trying to eat things that are strategically not poisoned, right? Things that have the least amount of toxic influences being put on them or in them before it goes into our body, because it's going to have long-term effects. It may not in the short term, but long-term, it's going to make a difference, you know? You'll see the fruit of it sooner or later. So this is how he handles that fear. Check this out. So the sovereign took counsel and made 2 calves of gold. Does this sound like Exodus, y'all? Come on. And said to the people, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. See your mighty ones, O Israel, which brought you up from the land of Mitzrayim. Come on. They fell for it again. People are highly repeatable on how you bring them down. And he set one up in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. And this matter became a sin, for the people went before the one as far as Dan. And he made the house of high places, and made priests of all sorts of people who were not of the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam so now he sets up also a different priesthood that's totally against the people that Yahuah chose to be his priests. So you just see how quickly this goes down a rabbit hole of terror. And Jeroboam performed a festival on the 15th day of the 8th new moon, like the festival that was in Yehudah, and he offered on the slaughter place. So he did at Bethel, slaughtering to the calves that he had made. And at Bethel he appointed the priests of the high places, which he had made. And he made offerings on the slaughter place, which he had made at Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th new moon, in the new moon which he had devised in his own heart. And he performed a festival for the children of Israel and offered on the slaughter place and burned incense. So you see this tradition of the elders that's been going on since then, of people worshiping Yahuah in ways that he does not want to happen, and them choosing to do it on or around the very times and seasons when we're supposed to worship him according to the feast days that he gave us. Like these traditions, you guys, that we're wrestling with and battling against and are causing a lot of conflicts and trials in people's life, this is nothing new. This is the things that people have been wrestling to break the cycles, generational strongholds for so long. People are worship factories, and they're going to go worship no matter what you say, as agnostic, atheistic, as ignorant, as aloof, as much as you say you're not. It's hardwired into you. We were designed to edify and magnify and glorify. Now, what we choose to point that in and what we choose to make massive in our life and put at the epicenter of our heart, it's going to come and germinate. Those seeds are coming out. We're going to see the fruit of it sooner or later. But you know what? It's a powerful thing to hear to see how Yahuah responds to this, because you'll get to see a father who's grieving, like he's watching his child make a terrible, horrible decision with what he's entrusted to them. And see, a man of Elohim went from Yehudah to Bethel by the word of Yahuah, while Jeroboam was standing by the slaughter place to burn incense. And he cried out against the slaughter place by the word of Yahuah and said, O slaughter place, thus says Yahuah, see, a son is to be born to the house of David. Yoshiyahu is his name. And on you he shall slaughter the priests of the high place, who burn incense on you, and men's bone be burned on you. And he gave a sign the same day, saying, this is the sign which Yahuah has spoken. See, the slaughter place is split apart, and the ashes on it is poured out. And it came to be, when sovereign Jeroboam heard the saying of the man of Elohim, who cried out against the slaughter place in Bethel, that he stretched out his hand from the slaughter place, saying, seize him. Then his hand, which he'd stretched out toward him, dried up, so that he was unable to bring it back to him. And the slaughter place was split apart, and the ashes poured out from the slaughter place, according to the sign which the man of Elohim had given by the word of Yahuah. So first of all, the man of Elohim prophesies that Yahuah is going to raise up the destroyer of these abominations out of the line of David. So he's saying in the house of Judah, Yahuah is going to raise up a king who will come and tear down these idols, and he's going to slaughter these wicked priests. He's like, I'm going to round up the black robe priests and burn them on this place and defile this altar with the dead bones of these men who have been wicked in my sight. And this word comes to pass later on. So, like, this is one of those prophecies that you're reading about in scripture that gives evidence that we have like a reliable prophecy, name, a physical name of an individual who's going to rise up in a different kingdom, who's going to come and execute judgment according to this word. And so then as you're reading along through the story here, all of a sudden when you go through so many generations before you get to him. It's a long way. It's hundreds of years before you suddenly get to Josiah, you suddenly get to him and you're like, oh, sweet deliverance. Here comes the arbiter of justice to bring about the fulfillment of this word. That's what it's like. The scriptures are amazing, and it's not like other texts when you read it, because you get these moments of longing and hope fulfilled. You get to actually have that hope fulfilled instead of hope deferred. And the sovereign answered and said to the man of Elohim, please appease me before the face of Yahuah your Elohim, and pray for me, that my hand might be restored to me. And the man of Elohim appeased the face of Yahuah, and the sovereign's hand was restored to him, and became as it was before. The sovereign then said to the man of Elohim, come home with me and refresh yourself, and I will give you a gift. You're warned about in the scriptures not to receive a bribe, because a bribe blinds the eyes. Be careful. But the man of Elohim said to the sovereign, if you were to give me half your house, I do not go in with you, nor do I eat bread, nor drink water in this place. For so he commanded me by the word of Yahuah, saying, do not eat bread, nor drink water, nor return by the same way you came. So he went another way, and did not return by the way he came to Bethel. And a certain old prophet was dwelling in Bethel, and his sons came and told him all the works that a man of Elohim had done that day in Bethel, and the words which he had spoken to the sovereign. And their father said to them, which way did he go? And the sons had seen which way the man of Elohim went, whom came from Yehudah. And he said to his sons, saddle my donkey for me. And they saddled the donkey for him, and he rode on it, and went after the man of Elohim, and found him sitting under a terebinth tree. And he said to him, are you the man of Elohim who came from Yehudah? And he said, I am. And he said to him, come home with me and eat bread. And he said to him, I am not able to return with you, or to go in with you, nor am I to eat bread or drink water with you in this place. For word came to me by the word of Yahuah, do not eat bread nor drink water there, nor return by going the way you came. And he said to him, I too am a prophet like you, and a messenger, an immortal, spoke to me by the word of Yahuah, saying, bring him back with you to your house, and let him eat bread and drink water. But he lied to him. Come on, dirty games. So he turned back with him, and ate bread in his house, and drank water. And it came to be as they sat at the table that the word of Yahuah came to the prophet who had brought him back. And he cried out to the man of Elohim who came from Yehudah, saying, thus said Yahuah, because you have rebelled against the mouth of Yahuah, and have not guarded the command which Yahuah your Elohim commanded you, and turned back and ate bread, and drank water in the place which he said to you, do not eat bread nor drink water. Your body shall not enter the burial site of your fathers. And it came to be, after he had eaten bread and after he had drunk, that he saddled the donkey for him, for the prophet whom he had brought back. And then he went, and a lion met him on the way and killed him. And his body was thrown on the way, and the donkey was standing by it, and the lion was standing by the body. And see, men were passing by and saw the body thrown on the way, while the lion was standing by the body. And they went and reported it in the city where the old prophet dwelt. And the prophet who had brought him back by the way heard it and said, it is the man of Elohim who rebelled against the mouth of Yahuah. And Yahuah gave him to the lion, and it tore him apart and killed him according to the word of Yahuah which he spoke to him. And he spoke to his son, saying, saddle the donkey for me. And they saddled it. So he went and found his body thrown on the way, and the donkey and the lion standing by the body. The lion had not eaten the body, nor mauled the donkey. And the prophet lifted up the body of the man of Elohim, and placed it on the donkey, and brought it back. And the old prophet came to the city to mourn and to bury him. And he placed his body in his own burial site. And they lamented over him, saying, oh, my brother. And it came to be after he had buried him, that he spoke to his son, saying, when I am dead, then you shall bury me in the burial site where the man of Elohim is buried. Lay my bones beside his bones.
For the word which he cried out by the word of Yahuah against the slaughter place in Bethel, and against all the houses of the high places which are in the cities of Shamaron, shall certainly come to be.
After this event, Jeroboam did not turn from his evil way, but again he made priests from all sorts of people for the high places. Whoever wished, he ordained to become one of the priests of the high places. And this matter was the sin of the house of Jeroboam, even to cut it off and destroy it from the face of the earth. The deep sin was that the priesthood was being sold and bought, was being picked up by people who had no right to be carriers of the priesthood, right? People that had no position to be in a place of authority were being established as sons of authority in this priesthood. And it created confusion. It created all kinds of horrible, rotten fruit. And as you track the story in continuity towards the future, you get to this moment where there is this just unleashing of it. And part of the challenge of having taken out some of these texts, like even the books of the Maccabees, when you remove those, like I remember just even the other day, I was reading through somebody's commentary of the scriptures, and they literally said after the book of Malachi in their chronological timeline, they said the Old Testament writings is closed, right? Like declaratively, like there was no other. I had a Bible, and I cannot find it to this day, but I had a Bible that had a page between the book of Malachi and the book of Matthew, and it literally said 400 years of silence. And then you turn the page, and it's like Matthew, and it's this like erroneous idea that really there was nothing that took place during that timeline in history that was preserved or that was cherished or regarded as important for us to know the story, because you just get to the book of Matthew and they're like, then there's these Pharisees people, and you're like, when do we read about the Pharisees in Malachi? Like if you're reading it, I always thought it was going to be lined up more historically, chronologically, but you don't get it that way. And because of that, it leads to a lot of confusion. But if you read some of these other texts, you suddenly are like, oh, go figure. This purchasing of the priesthood that took place in the book of Maccabees is a huge deal because you get to see the Greeks coming in, one of the Antichrist figures establishing himself, and all of the different schemes and conspiracies that are taking place in history in order to establish another false priesthood to get themselves in a position of power to buy their way in and to be able to be the ones that are in positions of control. Like that's why like I hammer on dealing with things like the two Babylons and the fruit of what happened with this same kingdom, a different priesthood rising up from the Roman Empire, and seeing the mixture of pagan traditions, mixing pagan traditions into biblical living, right? And the eradication of the followers of the way. The persecution of the followers of the way did not stop after Nero and didn't suddenly get a reprieve during the times of Constantine. The people who were preserving the words of Yahuah, people that literally had Hebrew texts, were persecuted and they were burned alive. Like people think that the horrible inquisition that was taking place throughout history was against, the Muslims. It was not just them. They eradicated and hunted down people that kept the Sabbath, kept the feast, or ate biblically clean. And when you read the book of Maccabees, those are exactly the people that they targeted and sought to eradicate. Anybody who had Hebrew copies of the letters of the New Testament was hunted down and killed, because they literally, on one side they had this house of Judah, these people that were masquerading in that position of authority, working with the Roman Catholics to eradicate and expunge from the historical record people that guarded the ways of Yahuah, and they wanted them to fit into these confines, and they weren't allowed to deviate from that. And so, like, and by the way, the position of the Inquisition, you guys, if you're not aware of it, like our Pope, the people that are thinking of this white robed little guy driving around out there, like these people were literally, Ratzinger and some of these others, they were literally the heads of the Inquisition still today. Like there's still departments of the Inquisition. That didn't stop. It just went covert, it just went underground, right? It's like a corporation, like Blackwater, like the guys, the mercenaries from the war in Iraq. They got a lot of bad public press, PR press, right? They're like, we'll just change our name. Nobody will know any better. right? A lot of these people, they're like, let's just change our name and get a new branding, new logo, and then we'll re-release ourselves elsewhere, right? And this is literally what's taking place time and in memorial, right? They're like, no, pay attention to Circo. Don't look at the most powerful octopus network of nightmares in the entire world, right? Like the East India Trading Company has basically modified itself and taken over all the colonies of the world through Circo, right? If you don't know about it, it's like another head of the dragon. Stuff to consider. But the way that these insidious members of society operate doesn't really change. They're willing to change their face, their appearance. They're shapeshifters, right? That's why we're always dealing with like, these are the powers behind these things because they operate like their fathers do, because they're the priests of his kingdom. And so they serve him in that manner, right? If you go to Jeremiah 3 real quick, we'll just zoom in for a second on the house of Israel getting divorced from the house of Judah and from Yahuah. This is a really important passage too. And then we'll jump back into Matthew too. I'm going to have to wrap this up quick. This has been fun, thrilling. I mean, how crazy is it? The lion is killing that prophet. He's like, I'm going to kill you. And I'm going to sit right next to your body. The Bible's wild, dude. It's wild. It's way more exciting, isn't it? I just think it's so cool. I don't know why that's not on the children's like storybooks. That should be right in front and center in the middle of it. They're reading along. They're like, oh, yeah, Jeroboam. So the child can grow up and be like, dang it, Jeroboam. Dang it. You should know that story really well. And I mean, you could cinch it. That's the story to tell your children. You're like, yeah, man, you want to understand what happens when we do with idols? Withered hands. I mean, come on. It's very Lord of the Rings-esque. It's cool stuff. The Bible's amazing. Chapter 3 of Jeremiah. Yirmiyahu. Elohim said, if a man puts away his wife and goes from him and becomes, well, let me stop for a second. This is fast forwarding into the story a while, a couple hundred years, right? All the idolatry, crazy stuff, like Israel gets taken away into captivity and they're like scattered through the whole nations of the world. And like, yeah, the house of Israel goes everywhere, all over the place. Now the house of Judah is about to get judged because they're like, dang it, Judah, you guys went and followed after the sins just like the children of Israel. And you made all the people sin. Jeroboam made the people sin. But then in Judah, it was like the people made the king sin. They're like, we want idols. We want immortals. Let's do it. So Yahuah is ticked, and now he's going to deal with them. But he's going to write it out here. If a man puts away his wife, and she goes from him and becomes another man's, does he return to her again? Would not the land be made greatly unclean? But you have committed whoring with many lovers. And would you return to me, declares Yahuah? Lift up your eyes to the bare heights and see, where you have not lain with men, beside the ways you have set for them like an Arabian in the wilderness. You made the land unclean with your whorings and your evil. Therefore the showers have been withheld, and there's been no latter rain. You have had a whore's forehead. You refuse to be ashamed. Shall you not from now on cry to me, my father? You are the guide of my youth. Does one bear a grudge forever? Does one keep it to the end? See, you have spoken and done the evils that you could. And Yahuah said to me in the days of Yoshiyahu the sovereign, have you seen what backsliding Yisrael has done? She has gone up on every high mountain and under every green tree, and there committed whoring. After she had done all these, I said, return to me. But she did not return. And her treacherous sister Yahudah saw it. And I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Yisrael had committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a certificate of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Yahudah did not fear, but went and committed whoring too. And it came to be through her frivolous whoring that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and wood. And yet for all this, her treacherous sister Yahudah has not turned to me with all her heart, but falsely, declares Yahuah. And Yahuah said to me, backsliding Israel has shown herself more righteous than treacherous Yahudah. Go and proclaim these words towards the north, saying, return, O backsliding Israel, declares Yahuah. I shall not look on you in displeasure, for I am lovingly committed, declares Yahuah, and I do not bear a grudge forever. Only acknowledge your crookedness, because you have transgressed against Yahuah your Elohim, and have scattered your ways to strangers under every green tree, and you have not obeyed my voice, declares Yahuah. Return, O backsliding children, declares Yahuah, for I shall rule over you, and shall take you, one from a city and two from a clan, and shall bring you to Zion. And I shall give you the shepherds according to my heart, and they shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. And it shall be when you have increased and shall be fruitful in the land in those days, declares Yahuwah, that they no longer say, the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah. Neither would it come to their heart, nor would they remember it, nor would they visit it, nor would it be made again. At that time, Jerusalem shall be called the throne of Yahuwah, and all the nations shall be gathered to the name of Yahuwah, to Jerusalem, and no longer walk after the stubbornness of their evil heart. So this is literally Yahuwah is giving a bill of divorce to the house of Israel because of their adulteries and all of those things that they have done. But even amidst that, he is telling them and their children after them, turn back to me, come back to me, and I will restore loving commitment to you. I'll have mercy for you, compassion on you. Come back to me and repent. And he literally says he's going to draw people back to him, one from a family and two from a city. What does it say? One from a city and two from a clan. This is the beautiful like prophecies about how Yahuwah is going to bring restoration to the people again, right? Let's jump into the house of Judah. In those days, the house of Yehudah shall go to the house of Israel, and they shall come together out of the land of the north to the land that I have given as an inheritance to your fathers. This is the prophecy about the restoration of the two houses of Israel. It's an imperative central theme through the entirety of the scriptures, all the way from the very beginning of the story to the very end. And these are those verses about this great exodus, this great returning, when all of the scattered lost sheep of the house of Israel are joined back with that house of Judah, and they become one stick in the hand of Yahuwah. Like one, it talks about this in Ezekiel, this prophecy about these two branches getting woven back together, and there'll be one people to him as well. This is a beautiful prophecy. And anytime you see them in the scriptures where he talks about gathering them from the lands of the north, this is this greater exodus that is promised to come, this great restoration of the kingdom. But verse 19, but I said, how would I put you among the children and give you a pleasant land, a splendid inheritance of the hosts of the nations? And I said, call me my father, and do not turn away from me. But indeed, as a wife betrays her husband, so you have betrayed me, O house of Israel, declares Yahuwah. A voice was heard on the bare heights, weeping the supplications of children of Israel, because they perverted their way. They've forgotten Yahuwah their Elohim. Return, O backsliding children. I shall make your backsliding cease. See, we have come to you, for you are Yahuwah our Elohim. Truly, delusion comes from the high hills, the noisy throng on the mountains. Truly, in Yahuwah our Elohim is the deliverance of Israel. For shame has devoured the labor of our fathers from our youth, their flocks and their herds, their sons and their daughters. We shall lie down in our shame, while our reproach covers us, for we have sinned against Yahuwah our Elohim, we and our fathers, from our youth even to this day, and have not obeyed the voice of Yahuwah our Elohim. This is part of those stories that if you miss it, it really doesn't make as much sense. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys so that just give a little more context to the story when you see the house of Israel. That's the kind of stuff that for me pops into my mind. And it helps me to have an understanding of why it's so important. This story is put in, they zooms in on the historical events of things that Yeshua did. And this woman is given like a significant section of time. But this is why, because Yeshua is literally came, part of like his mission was to gather up the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's like the focal point of why he came, is to destroy the works of the devil, to destroy the works of the devil, and to gather the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And this is what's so beautiful, is how he also treats a woman who is not part of that. Check this out. Back in Matthew 15. And he answering said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and was bowing to him, saying, Master, help me. And he answering and said, it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. But she said, yes, master, for even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table. And Yeshua, by the way, the word for dog that he's using there is like household pet. This is not like the dogs that are outside in the streets. Different word. And Yeshua answering said to her, oh woman, your belief is great. Let it to be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that hour. You got to love it when Yeshua has turned with compassion. This reminds me of the story where David has compassion over Absalom, and Yahuah sends a woman to challenge him. We read about that a little bit ago, but she challenged him with a parable. And he's like, dang, that's a good point. This woman has some brilliant answer towards that, you know. Hallelujah. By the way, this is where I get all of my bases for what dogs are made to eat. Scraps that fall from the master's table. Consider it. Don't buy your dog food ever again if you can help it, please. I've seen so many families take my advice on this dead seriously and stop feeding their dog anything except for scraps from the family's table, and their dog's health improves drastically. Oh my gosh. There is such a difference to be made when your animals are able to eat the way that they were intended to eat, as opposed to the way that Purina says they should eat, and the conspiracy with veterinarians' offices to keep your pets sick. Read the book, Dead Pets Don't Lie. Challenge you. Read it. Something to consider. I'll rant on that another time. I'm going to finish this up here. And moving from there, Yeshua came towards the Sea of Galilee, and going up on the mountain, he was sitting there, and large crowds came to him, having with them those who were lame, blind, dumb, crippled, and many others. And they laid them down at the feet of Yeshua, and he healed them, so that the crowd marveled when they saw the dumb speaking, the crippled well, the lame walking, and the blind seeing. And they praised the Elohim of Yisrael. Yeshua, having called his taught ones near, said, I have compassion on the crowd, because they've now continued with me 3 days, and do not have whatever they to eat. And I do not wish to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. And his taught one said to him, Where are we to get enough bread in the desert to satisfy such a crowd? Yeshua said to them, How many loaves do you have? And they said, 7, and a few little fish. And he commanded the crowd to sit down on the ground. And taking the 7 loaves and the fish, giving thanks, he broke them and gave to his taught ones, and the taught ones to the crowd. And all ate and were satisfied. And they picked up what was left over, the broken pieces, 7 large baskets filled. And those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And dismissing the crowd, he went into the boat and came to the borders of Magdala. Hallelujah. He provides people their needs. He's healing them. He's delivering them. And you know what? My prayer is that you guys would be satisfied with the bread of heaven, the word of life like never before, that you would truly hunger and desire it more than you desire that bread, those bowls of deliciousness. Seriously, I just my deepest desire and longing is to try to impart to you guys a love for the word, a hunger for the word. I could be a great salesman in the business world, have been in the past. But you know what? I've realized with that came a responsibility of a talent that was given to me to persuade people to do things. And I just, if anything I could try to use that for in my life, is to persuade people to have a hunger for this. Because you know what? It was my hunger for this that ransomed me out of darkness. It was my hunger for this word and my faith in him, the author of it, that purchased me from that pain and from that suffering. And you know what? It was what held me close on the thing during times when it was impossible. And some of you are like that demon possessed girl, or you're the parents of them, and you're crying out and you're desperate. And the days of suffering are immense for some of you. And I groan for you. You know, we have a dear friend whose wife is terminal with cancer right now. And she's a young mom, and it's tearing us up watching that. You know, my wife had oh man, a year ago was horrifying watching my wife dying in front of my face. And I just groan for the dads and the fathers that are out there who have children and they're watching their wives be sick. And we, a month before Chelsea gave birth to the twins, we had another dear friend whose wife died somewhat soon after having a child, and it was horrible. Another close friend of Chelsea, and he ransomed her life and spared her life, you know, and we're watching others who are suffering continually. There's a lot of hurt in the body. There's a lot of people that are wounded and weary and exhausted. And you know what? This is why we got to turn to these words. This is why we should know these things, so that we can give, we can strengthen the hands that hang down and strengthen those weak knees. Like, that's what this word is here for us to do. If we have it in our hearts, we're able to encourage the weary with a word. And you know what? That's what people need. There's a lot of people right now who need that. Many of you have done that for our family. Like, I'm just seeing the incredible support and encouragement that we had going through that season, and we still have from so many of you today. Thank you guys for that. Thank you for the unbelievable support and the intercession that you had for us and still have for us. That has literally been a fuel for my family. And you know what? It empowers so many people when we can learn his word so we can pray for them. We can pray for our friends who are hurting. We can pray for those that are depressed and oppressed by the devil. And we can seek to be his beacons of light, setting captives free on this earth. And you know what? I just pray that Yahuah would administer his healing again, his deliverance, and his restoration to those of you who are in need of it and crying for it. In accordance with his perfect will, may he bless you and strengthen you and encourage you like never before, so you guys can be those brave and courageous warriors you were made to be. I love you all so much. Thanks for going on this journey. I'll talk to you soon.